Hey y'all, it's Laura and welcome back to another process video. This one is for Photoplay Paper's YouTube Hop, which is sponsored by Scrapbook Your Joy, which is a Canadian store that carries a multitude of collections. And they asked me if I would join in and sent me a Photoplay paper pack called We Are Family, as well as the embellishment pack, which is die cuts. And the purpose for this hop is to show you how to make the most of minimal embellishments. So for this collection, it has a lot of beautiful papers, but it only has a sticker sheet and a die cut pack. And so I have a couple of tips and tricks that should help you in making the most of minimal embellishments, but plenty of paper. I think this is a situation that we sometimes find ourselves in with collections where we love the papers, but maybe the embellishments don't really grab us. And so we just pick up a pack or two of the embellishments and then think, how are we going to use just these embellishments? And so then we reach into our stash and try to fill it up. Well, I'm going to show you that you don't necessarily have to do that. So if you had grabbed some papers and a couple of embellishments from a store, you could just go ahead and make a layout with it just like this. Now to get started, I am going to cut some strips of the beautiful papers from this collection, and I'm going to be creating some little pockets up at the top where I can tuck in some small embellishments. So starting with this floral paper and then these other pieces that I've cut into varying angled triangles of sorts, not quite triangles, angled strips. And that way they create a really cool pocket effect, and I can tuck in some bits and pieces up there just for a little added embellishing. I'm going to be using these three photos of my kiddos. I have my youngest son, my oldest daughter, and my oldest son there, and they had just gotten fresh haircuts, and we'd gotten back in the car, and I thought, let's take a picture. I think you guys look great. So let's go ahead and take a quick picture, and they were all up for it. So once in a while, a random everyday photo is just kind of fun to do. I've been scrapping a lot of my twins lately, and so I thought I really needed to focus on some of my older kids' photos, and that has been my focus for this month, to scrap as many pictures of these three as I can. So this layout will go into our family album, and I thought that this particular collection would be perfect for these photos. They don't really have any strong colors to them except just a little bit of blue, and so I thought using this very colorful collection in the background would make the photos stand out a little bit because they are so dark, and these bright colors will help it pop, help those photos to just jump off the page. So my first tip for having minimal embellishments is to make your papers do the work. So in this case, I've created a background using a variety of papers, and I find when you have more going on in the background, you feel like you need to use less embellishments on the page. So by creating these varying busy stripes in the background, I've created an upper area that doesn't need a lot of embellishing, and the bottom will have the most of it, but we'll find ways around that too. The second tip is quite often with stickers and die cuts, you have to sort of punch out the shape. So in the case with Photoplay die cuts, you do have to pop out the shapes from a background, and there's often an outline left behind, and in this case what I did was cut out those outlines as well and then back them with some pattern paper, and ta-da! I have twice as many tabs as I originally had in the collection. You can do this with tags, with circles. It often works with sticker sheets too. So as you know, some sticker sheets have the color bleeding over the actual sticker you pulled off, and so there's the remaining shape left behind. And you can cut that out, put it on top of some pattern paper, and bam, you have another embellishment. Before I forget, this is a hop, and there are a number of other creators that are joining me in using Photoplay kits to create a layout, giving you tips and tricks for taking the most out of your embellishments or making your own embellishments from a kit like this that doesn't come with a ton of options. And so I will be sure to link them in the description box below so you can hop along, and they should all have the same thumbnail, I think, so that you can see very clearly who's participating and what video they're sharing. Now, my third tip will be coming up in just a minute, but I will show you that this floral here I do really like, but it has a really thick border border on it. And as just a little sneaky tip here for scrapbooking, if you don't like that thick border, you can fussy cut it off. And I do that quite frequently with the bits and pieces that I add onto this layout and most layouts. I just don't love the thick border. Now, when it's on a title, however, I will generally leave it alone just because it's very difficult to cut those words into something pretty. Often you'll end up with awkward angles and weird gaps if you mess with the word. So I generally leave titles alone, but florals especially, I do fussy cut quite a lot of those borders off. So reaching into the sticker sheet that came with the kit, I am adding some small embellishments up at the top, just some word phrases and some hearts and tiny florals. And I want these to just tuck in with the tabs, but I don't want to cover the tabs up. The tabs are the point. And it allows me to add some minor embellishing at the top of the page without overwhelming the layout or drawing too much attention away from the photos. Another key part of this design is the fact that I'm using multiple photos. I find in my scrapbooking that the more photos that I put on the page, the less embellishment the page typically needs. So that's another way to keep your embellishing to a minimum, is to use multiple photos on a page. In this one, I'm using 3, but you could certainly use larger photos and more of them, however you like to design your page. Now, my plan for this page is to have this minor embellishing at the top. I'm going to have my title directly below my center photo, a row of banners underneath of that, and then some journaling at the bottom. So my very vertical design here is offset by the horizontal strips in the back. So it doesn't look like a very strong vertical design, but it does fill the page. And I do like to fill the page. I don't know about you, but having too much blank space on the layout just makes me feel like it's not done, and I just want to keep adding all of the things. But now I'm going to move on to the banners, I believe, and add some of them underneath of my photos. But first, I think I add a piece of ephemera directly behind the photos, almost like a large tab of its own behind them. Here we go, with a little sentiment. And I thought that was a nice way to help connect the photos together. I have taped them together at this point, and so I can move them around as one piece, but by having that sentiment at the top, it helps to kind of tie them together. Now, the kit came with these 4 die-cut flags. Obviously, that's not enough to go underneath of 3 photos. So here's tip number 3. I'm going to use these die cuts with pattern paper to create more. So this is really easy to do with just about any basic shape, whether it's heart, circles, stars, banners, whatever you like. You can use those shapes that came with the collection to cut and create your own. And so this way I am able to add on an additional 5 banners underneath of these photos and really fill out that section of the layout. I'm even using both sides of the papers. In this case, it's a cut apart paper, so the back side had a variety of other color options that were not available otherwise. I had some nice dark blues here. I had some light blues on the back, I believe. And so I'm going to make use of both sides of my pattern papers to get a variety of colors and patterns. I don't end up using any 2 of the same. They're all different little flags, and I just think that's kind of a fun way to go. Now, part of these flags will be covered up with my title, and I'm aware of that. And so I'm trying to put the patterns that I like the most on the outside photos, so they won't be as covered up as the ones in the center. Now, I did vary the length of these flags just because I find that interesting, and I do tend to put the longer flag in the center. So in the center of each photo, there is a longer flag and then some shorter flags on either end, and I do try to vary even those lengths up a little bit just to make it look cool, just for a fun little bit of interesting. By having everything at different levels, it is interesting to the eye and helps draw your attention to it, which, being right below my photos, is very, very helpful. It's also just a lot of fun to have varying lengths of things on your page and not have everything perfectly line up. The brain finds things that are not perfect or not linear or not symmetrical. You're unable to look away. You're unable to just ignore it. It is kind of a little trick that we often use in the design world to get your attention to something on the layout. It just grabs your attention and makes you look at, why does this not look quite right? Why does this not look perfect? And it pulls your attention in, and I do this a lot with my pages. I don't make them symmetrical. I make one area completely different than the other, and it's usually around my photos because that's what draws your eye in, and I always want that to be the focus. Now here I've cut off the little white border around these glasses and then tucked them back up there because I felt like with that white border, they were popping just a little bit too much. Now in this case, I left the white border on some of the florals at the top because they're sitting on that floral paper, and if I removed those white borders, you wouldn't see them at all. They would fade completely into the background. Now I will bring in a couple of stickers here for these two end flags, just to add a little character, a little something interesting. I also add some little houses around the title. Those will move down in just a moment and become part of the title because I felt like the photos were just too empty. They needed something. So I do a cluster of photos around the title and eventually come in with a sentiment that I cut in half on either side of those houses as well. And I really like how that works. I was really glad that this collection had a lot of small scattering type pieces as well as the larger elements. That's something that I personally look for in collections when I'm buying them, that I don't have to go digging into my stash to find all the little tiny scattering pieces. They already come coordinated with the kit. Now, because I've created two of those tabs at the top with pattern paper, they don't have sentiments on them. So I did grab my Tim Holtz tiny word phrases, and I'm going to go ahead and tuck in two of those on my newly made tabs. And that just adds some extra words to the page, and being a lover of books and writing, I do tend to put a lot of words on my pages. You may have noticed that. That's the reason, is I love words, and it just makes me happy when there's lots of things to read on a page. I am going to outline all of the layers with my pen. Not all of these outlines show up in a strong way, but some of them do. It helps to create a bit of a shadow and a definition between the layers. You can also do some of the old school inking between the layers if you would prefer, has the same effect. I am going to bring this family title up here to the top because I felt like my floral up at the top was drawing a little bit too much attention to itself. There was a lot of it showing, and so I decided to cover some of it up with this family. But then I realized that the white outline on this sticker was making it stand out a bit too much. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that off, put my family subtitle of sorts back in place, and you will see that that kind of tones down the floral print just a little bit so that your eye is drawn more to the photos and less to the giant gorgeous floral at the top of this page. I have to admit, I am a sucker for a gorgeous floral, and that is what drew me to this particular collection. So now I've got a sentiment here that I want to add half and half on either side of this center title. So I think it says laugh daily, but by putting it the way that I did, it says laugh, love daily, which I thought was quite nice and would be good for a sibling layout like this one. So that kind of fills in that area. I add a couple of small florals back between the title and that little sentiment just to spruce up those houses there and add just a little bit of something extra, a little extra detail. That's my favorite part of any scrapbook layout, is adding in those tiny details to my clusters that just make it so intricate, that make it so delicate. I love that part of scrapbooking. Now I've gotten out my T-square ruler and I'm making some journaling lines. I do add journaling to almost all of my layouts. As I mentioned earlier, I do like words and don't have a shortage of them to share. So most of my layouts do have journaling, and I've saved you from watching me writing all of that. But I do really appreciate Scrapbook Your Joy including me in their Photoplay hop, and I hope you have found some interesting inspiration for stretching your embellishments out and making the most of kits like these. I've really enjoyed this layout. The color scheme is gorgeous, and I cannot help but do a bit of gold splattering on any dark wood grain. Be sure to check the description box below for the links to the other ladies in this hop, and until next time, bye!